Welcome back. In this particular video, we're going to talk about the basics of language. This is specific to some parts, not the entire, but only some parts of Chapter 9, Language from the textbook. Now, first question is, why do we even need to talk about language? Keep in mind, the puzzle for this class is to understand how we comprehend written text. And a written text is an expression of a written language. So there is no text if there is no language. Language forms the basis of written text. So it is imperative that we actually study language and know the basics of language. And that's one reason why we're talking about language in the first place. And knowing that ahead of time, initially in the first week of class, actually helps you build your understanding that you'll eventually need to actually write that paper. So the outcomes for this particular unit are basically related to these six questions. We'll talk about what language is. Then we'll talk about what makes language universal. Then we'll study how we acquire language. We'll talk about how psychologists and linguists they study language, and we answered these common two questions at the end about does language determine our thought and is language unique to humans. So let's get started with the first question. What is language? So let's get to the first question. What is language? Well, it's a shared system of communication. So it's a shared in the sense that there's a common understanding about what these different words we use in a language mean. For instance, we use the word communication itself, the word is, the word what. These different words in a given language specifically mean something because we have a common understanding, and that's a shared understanding. So it's a shared system of communication. And in this communication, one important, yet another important aspect, I'm sorry, about language is the use of symbols. So when you communicate, you use symbols to communicate. These symbols can be sounds, for example, the words you use, or the symbols can be non-sounds, like signs, for instance, in the American Sign Language. So these sounds or these signs are a form of symbols, and we'll talk about what these symbols are in the next slide. So I just want to give you some specific aspects of the definition of language and the points that you need to pay attention to. The fact that it's a shared system of communication and that it uses symbols. And another thing I want you to pay attention to is the fact that there are rules to combine these symbols at various levels. And we'll talk about what these various levels of symbols are. Just understand that it's a system of communication with use of symbols, and there are rules of combining symbols. So, what are symbols then? Well, a symbol is a representation of either an object, an event, or an idea in the real world. So let's take an example here. This is a real object in the real world, coffee mug. And we are representing this object in the real world in this format. Visually, this can be the coffee mug. In the sense of sounds, it is that particular representation which sounds something like this, coffee mug. So this particular thing represents this particular object. So this is a symbol that represents this object. This is the representation, and this is what it represents. So another example is this particular symbol called chalk represents this exact or this specific object in the real world. So this is a representation, and this is the object that it is representing. Now, another important point about symbols is that the connection between the symbol it represents, between the symbol itself and the object it represents, is completely arbitrary. It's completely arbitrary. Arbitrary in the sense that there is no real connection. For instance, there is no connection between the sound chalk or the way we write chalk and the actual chalk in the real world. So also coffee mug and the real coffee mug in the real world. So this connection makes symbols unique and gives these property for a language that makes it unique to humans. So for instance, let's say that we together form a new shared understanding that that we're gonna represent this as chalk and we're gonna represent this as coffee mug. So I'm gonna say, okay, let's have a chalk of coffee mug, or sorry, let's have coffee in a chalk. It's not going to change the world, right? And however odd it may sound initially, eventually it will all make sense once we get this understanding together. So the point I'm trying to make is that what makes symbol a symbol is this random connection between the representation, its object in the real world. It is made up. It's completely random. That's why it's a shared system of communication. Now, we said language is a shared system of communication via symbols and with the rules to combine symbols at various levels. Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this slide. What these symbols are and what do we mean by various levels of symbols? Well, as we defined in the previous slide, a symbol is something that represents something else, right? The basic unit of symbol in English or any spoken language as such at least is a phoneme. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound. In English language, because that's the language we both know in common, or any language as such, has two kinds of phonemes. Can you think of what these two types of phonemes are? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. What did you say? That's right. The consonants and the vowels, right? Do you know how many consonants there are? Well, I'm pretty sure you know. Do you know how many vowels there are? Well, there are more than five. It is not just A, E, I, O, U. It's actually more than that because there are some vowels that are combination of vowels like A. I don't know if I'm representing it correctly. A is a combination vowel. It's called a diphthong. Well, again, this is not an English class, so we are not going to talk about it. But the point is that there are some basic symbols. And the most basic symbols in English language is a basic sound. And this basic sound is called a phoneme. And there are two types of phonemes, consonants and vowels. Okay. Now, it is equally true for other languages too. Just think about it. Do you know any other language? Are there some basic sounds? Right? And there are definitely consonants, vowels. Now, think about this question. How are different languages different? There is English language, let's say there is Spanish language, or let's say some Indian language. Indian here, I'm referring to the nation India, the country India. So, what is common among these languages? One commonality between these languages is that they all have phonemes. They all have phonemes. But what differentiates one language from the other is the set of phonemes that they have selected to be part of their system of language. There is a lot of overlap between these different languages, right? But there is also some unique phonemes that are unique to one language. For instance, there are some sounds in Indian languages that I speak that There are no representations for those in English language. For instance, there are some phonemes. I'm going to try to say those phonemes and see if you can figure them out. Like, do you see the distinction between pa, pa, ba, ba, ma, ma, ga, ga, ta, ta, ja, ja? So these are pairs of phonemes that are slightly different, and we have representation for each one of those. So the point is that each language is similar in that it has phonemes. It is also different in the sense that it has selected a specific set of phonemes to be a part of the symbolic system. Now, phonemes combine to form morphemes. A morpheme is the next level of symbol. Phoneme is the first level of symbol, which is the simplest unit of sound. Morpheme is the simplest unit of meaning. It's the simplest unit of meaning. So you can also say it's called morphology, study of the meaning of the words. You can say is morphology. Now, what is a morpheme? A morpheme is the simplest unit of meaning. Um, at a basic level, it includes the content words. Let's say dog. It has three phonemes: d, a, g. So it has three phonemes, and together it makes one meaningful unit. Let's say cat. It has three phonemes: k, a, t. So it has one meaningful unit. You cannot further break it down into any meaningful unit. So a morpheme is the simplest meaningful unit. And most of the morphemes are words themselves. But there are some morphemes that are not words. In other words, they carry meaning, but they cannot convey meaning on their own. For instance, the prefixes and suffixes. The prefixes, I'm sorry, I write really bad. The prefixes like un, right? In, as in unstable, right? So these prefixes and suffixes like the plural s or the past participle of ed. So you can say pen is a word. It is a simple morpheme which is also a word. If you add another morpheme, it becomes pens, which is also a word, but it's not a morpheme. Pens is not a morpheme, pen is, and s is. So the point is that this particular suffix s carries a meaning, so that's why it's a morpheme. But it cannot express the meaning on its own. It needs to be connected to other morphemes like pen to actually express its meaning. So there are two types of morphemes: those that express meaning by themselves, and they are usually words, and those that cannot express meaning by themselves, and these are the prefixes and the suffixes. And words themselves, which are either morphemes or a combination of morphemes, and this is the first level of symbols, this is the second level of symbols, and this is the third level of symbols, and words combine to form phrases. This is another level of symbols. Phrases combine to form clauses. It's another level of symbols. Clauses combine to form sentences. Another level of symbols. Sentences combine to form paragraphs. Another level of symbols. Paragraphs combine to form different sections of a chapter. And chapters combine to form books. Books of same one type, they combine to form a genre. A genre. So the idea is that you can think of a symbol at any of these levels. And in fact, when we define language, we said that language is a shared system of communication via symbols, and there are rules of combining symbols. What it means is there are rules of combining symbols at each of these levels. Each language has very unique set of and unique set of rules of combining symbols. For instance, let's say comb. How do you pronounce that? Comb? You don't say that, right? Because English language has this rule of combining these two phonemes, and b. You cannot say comb. You have to say comb. So the rules of combining phonemes is one level of rules, and generally we refer to this general rule as grammar. When I say grammar, I'm not referring to the grammar that you're used to in high school or in your college about sentence structure. It's just one aspect of it. Grammar refers to rules of combining symbols at each of these levels. The rules of combining phonemes, as you've seen in earlier case, the rules of combining morphemes, the rules of combining words, phrases, clauses, sentences, and so on and so forth. And all these refer to grammar in general. Okay, so coming to the second outcome for this video is what makes language universal. Think about it. What makes language? We have these different languages, right? Now, what makes language universal is that they all are systems of communication. They all are systems of communication, shared systems of communication. They all use some form of symbols. They all have rules of combining symbols. That's what makes language universal. But this is not just, these are not the only things that make language universal, right? Now, actually, Hackett proposed 13 features that you'll find in all known, at least spoken languages in the world. And the names of these features are written here: vocal auditory channel, broadcast, rapid fading, interchangeability, total feedback, specialization, semanticity, arbitrariness, discreteness, displacement, productivity, traditional transmission, and duality of pattern. So I'm not gonna describe or explain these things. You're smarter than that, right? You can figure that out. I want you to read the book chapter to actually know the specifics of this. Or if you need to go and find information from other sources, that's fine too. I want you to know these 13 features. And knowing these 13 features, what they mean, right, is important for you. And I want you to do it on your own so it will help you, and also that it may actually help you participate in the discussion section. Well, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next slide. Now let's get to the third outcome for this video. How do we acquire language? Now, according to linguist Noam Chomsky, we humans are born with this ability to learn language. And he called this ability LAD, language acquisition device. So only humans have this ability to learn language, and this idea came as a response, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the history of cognitive psychology, as a response to behaviorists who not only defined how humans learn behaviors, but they also describe language acquisition as a behavior and define how we learn behavior in terms of the behavioristic principles such as the rewards and punishments. And Noam Chomsky's response to that, we'll talk about that response later, but now he proposed the idea that no, you cannot teach language to animals. Language acquisition is a unique ability only specific to humans. We are born, we are hardwired with this ability, and he calls that land. Now, if you look at the stages of language acquisition, um, we'll talk about that. And by the way, this is a picture of my daughter. Um, and we can talk about the different stages of language acquisition. Now, what is the first sound? It's a spoken language that we're talking about, right? So it's going to be this sound. What is the first sound you make? You cry, right? Now, by 2 months, infants start making sounds like cooing, like okay, I'm not good at that, but you know what I'm saying. Now, can you think of what these cooing sounds might be closely related to? But this is not exactly like a theory, but I'm just suggesting. Just think about it. They're more like vowels, aren't they? Okay. Now, by 6 to 12 months, they start babbling. Now, what's a babble? I'm gonna try again. I'm really bad at this. So da da pa pa ba ba da da ta ta, things like those, right? Or these are consonants. In fact, the consonants plus vowels they don't say d b. They say da da ba ba. So they're combining the vowels with consonants. Again, it's just an idea. So they have both these sounds by a year, and by 6 to 12 months, they actually pick those sounds. By 1 year, they start making one word phrases. They start identifying objects and say bow, bow, or dog, or something along those lines. And by 2 years, 18 to 24 months, again, this is not very specific. It is there is a large variability, and typically girls, they learn language and they learn several other things like walking before boys do in general. By 18 to 12 months, they start producing two-word phrases, and they have vocabulary of about 50 words by then. So they can identify at least 50 objects by then. Not only identify, but they actually spell them out. When I say spell them out, they speak them out. So you get dog or book or dada or cat or things like those. And something happens around this time, 2 to 3 years. If you've seen a 2 to 3 year old and if you've seen them go from this to this stage, oh my God, they suddenly woke up. They suddenly woke up one day and they start speaking blah, 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 and they never stop. So now all these are different stages of language acquisition. And there is one important thing here. Our ability to learn language, according to Noam Chomsky, which is the LAD, language acquisition device, is unique in the sense that we are born to learn any language, right? So it's not just the genetic part of it, which is the nature part, that we have the ability, but nurture is also an important part. If you're not exposed to, as an infant and a kid, to a particular language, then it will be difficult for you to learn a language later on. So both nature and nurture plays an important role in language acquisition. Now let's get to the fourth outcome for this video, which is how is language studied? Well, there are at least two different levels of studying language. One is the linguistic level, the other is psycholinguistic level. Linguistic level is the level that linguists study language at, and obviously the psycholinguistic level is the level that psycholinguists study language at. Now, linguists are mostly interested in the prescription aspect of it. In other words, they study how a language ought to be, should be produced or understood. It's about the rules of language. They are more interested in the rules of language, so it's like prescriptive aspect of it. Psycholinguists, on the other hand, are more interested in not of the rules of language, but of how humans use language, how we use language. So it's more of a descriptive kind. So linguists are interested in the rules of language, psycholinguists are interested in knowing how the language is used by people. That's what psycholinguists, right? So linguists study language at these three levels: phonetics, syntax, and lexical semantics. And we're going to talk about these three in the next slides. And psycholinguists study language at these three levels plus two additional levels, and these two levels are conceptual and belief levels. Conceptual and belief levels. Okay, so we said that linguists study language at three levels: phonetics, syntax, and lexical semantics. Let's talk about phonetics first. Phonetic analysis is processing the sounds of the language. So it deals with the phonemes, and you know the two different kinds of phonemes, and you know there are rules of combining phonemes, and you also know that phonemes combine to form morphemes in words. Phonetic analysis is identifying the sounds of the words that you read. Now remember, everything we discuss in this class we'll discuss in the context of reading a sentence or reading a text, right? So what does phonetic analysis means then? Just imagine for a second, right? You're reading this sentence. What do you think happens in our mind? Well, the first thing it's reasonable to assume is that you sense these printed letters, and once these printed letters are captured, remember the sensation, your brain will attend it to these captured letters and it perceives it. When it perceives it, what we mean is that it will identify these printed letters. Now how do you think we identify? Let's start with each word. How do you think our mind identifies this word? Well, it identifies the individual letters first, and it identifies the sounds these individual letters make, right, and so on and so forth. Then it identifies the combination of these sounds, e, a, d, read, right? It identifies the combination of these sounds as a word. So in the context of solving the puzzle, it's important to understand what is the phonetic processing helping us with. Well, phonetic processing most likely is helping us to identify a word. So phonetic processing, which requires sensation, attention, perception, helps us identify read as a word. Again, we are not getting into the meaning of the word, we're not getting into the syntax, but phonetic processing just helps us identify this as one word, this as another word, this as another word, this as another word, and we keep on identifying these words as we go from word to word till we get to the end of the sentence. Usually it's clause, but for our purpose of this class is, let's say, it's sentence. So by the end of the sentence, you phonetically identified each of these words. Now your working memory or short-term memory has these identified individual words temporarily stored in it. And that's when, at the end of the sentence, you will start processing language at the remaining levels. Well, what is the next linguistic level? That's right, it's the syntax. Now, before we talk about syntax, I just want to take you to this particular slide, and these slides or these handouts are a part of the lecture and are part of the lecture slides, but they're also uploaded on Blackboard, so I suggest you download this and try to fill this on your own and see if you can answer these things. For example, it says linguistic analysis, right, is of three different levels. Is at three different levels. One is phonetics, the other one is semantics. What is the other one? I can't hear you. I'm sorry. What did you say? That's right. It's syntax, right? Now, phonetic processing leads to what? Did you say word identification? You're absolutely right, right? Word identification. So we talked about this, and in the next slide we'll talk about, yeah, you're right, syntactic analysis. Okay, so the second level of analyzing linguistically language is the syntactic level. The analysis of the word level, or the sorry, analysis of the word order, or the study of the structure of the language. Now, each language has its own structure to it, its own syntactic nature to it, right? For example, if you look at this particular sentence, I kissed my baby, right? Syntactically, this is an English language, it has a structure of SVO, subject, verb, and object. Can you identify the subject and verb and object in this particular sentence? You can pause it if you want. What is I? That's right, subject. Kissed is a verb. My baby is the object. I mean, the direct object, indirect object, we're not getting into that distinction. So English language as SVO structure. So at the syntactic level, one of the things our mind does is it identifies the subject, verb, and objects in a given sentence. Okay. Now, do you speak other languages? Do you know of other languages? What is the structure of the language? Is it same as SVO? Think about it. Perhaps not, right? Spanish language, I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell us more about in the discussions. But what is the structure of it? Is it SVO, French, or Japanese, or Indian languages? Do they have different structure? I bet definitely not all languages have this SVO structure. We know that English definitely has this SVO structure. Other languages may have other structural rules. Again, you can connect this to idea that different languages are different in terms of the phonemes they have or symbols they have and the rules of combining them. And here the rules of combining words will tell us the structure. So the structure of the language itself could be different in different languages. Now, it's when we say syntactic processing, it's not just the subject verb object, but it also refers to the parts of speech of each word. So you identify the subject verb object and you also identify the part of speech this particular word is playing. For instance, I, what is it playing? Noun, okay. Kissed, that's right. Baby, by the way, kissed is verb, right? Baby, noun. My, think about it. Okay, so this is about parts of speech. This is about the subject verb object structure. And the next thing, the next product of syntactic analysis is understanding the phrasal structure, phrasal structure of a given sentence. Again, remember, starting syntactic processing till the end of the list of 5 analyses we looked at, they happen at the level, at the end of the sentence. So let's look at the phrasal structure, what it means and what it means in terms of processing sentence and understanding the phrasal structure of it in the next slide. Okay, so we said in the syntactic analysis, there's The third thing, not only part of speech, not only the subject verb object of the individual words, but also the phrasal structure of the sentence. A phrasal structure refers to um, parsing a sentence into its components, and which includes dividing the sentence first into its most basic phrases. A sentence has the noun phrase and the verb phrase. A noun phrase is noun plus anything else, and the verb phrase is verb and everything else. So in this sentence, the policeman chased the burglar through the park, right? The noun phrase is the policeman part, and the rest of it would be a verb phrase. So you divide those two into noun and verb phrase. And the noun phrase, the policeman itself, is further divided into the noun itself, which is the policeman, and the determiner, the. Then the verb phrase, chase the burglar through the park, can be further divided into the verb itself, chased, right? And the burglar, which is a noun phrase, and the prepositional phrase, which is through the park. So chased the burglar through the park. The burglar itself, which is a noun phrase, again further be divided into the noun and the determiner. The prepositional phrase further can be divided into the preposition itself, which is through, and the noun phrase, which is the park. So phrasal structure refers to identifying each word, its phrasal structure. It's which part of this phrasal structure each word is. This is phrasal structure. So when you read a sentence and you're processing sentence at the syntactic level, again, this is all happening without actually processing at the conscious level. So syntactically, these are the assumptions psycholinguists or linguists think happens. So syntactically, this is what happens. You divide the sentence into its phrasal structure. So what is this here? Syntactic processing. It leads to phrasal structure. But it's not just phrasal structure. It also leads to identifying the parts of speech of each word and identifying the subject, verb, object, and the phrasal structure of the sentence. Well, that would be the end of these two levels of analysis of language that linguists study language at. And in the next slide, we'll talk about lexical semantics. It's not just semantics, it's lexical semantics, which has two parts to it, lexical and semantic, and we'll talk about both. So the third level that linguists study language at is the lexical semantic level, which is analyzing level or analyzing the content of language. Syntax is the analysis of the structure of language, and semantics or lexical semantics is about the content of the language. Now look at this one. Look at this sentence. Colorless ideas sleep furiously. Now, is it grammatically, syntactically correct? I think so, right? Colorless ideas would be the subject, sleep would be the verb, right? Now, of course, furiously is, what is furiously, by the way? I think it's adverb, right? So colorless ideas, colorless is the adjective, ideas is the noun, sleep is verb, and furious is the adverb. Anyways, so syntactically this is correct, but is it? Does it mean anything? It doesn't mean anything, right? So a sentence can have syntactically correct structure, but does not necessarily carry any meaning. The content may not carry any meaning. So it's important to understand it's not just the structure, also the content of a sentence. And we'll talk about the two lexical and semantic levels. First we'll talk about lexical, then we'll talk about the semantics. So we said that the lexical semantic has two aspects to it, lexical and semantic. Lexical here refers to word meaning, the meaning of the word that we learn. So when we say we analyze language, when we analyze language at the lexical semantic level, what we're saying is that we identify the meaning of the individual word at the lexical level and something else at the semantic level, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. So lexical refers to lexicon, dictionary. So lexical processing is identifying the word meaning. Now think about it. Why do you think there should be a syntactic processing before lexical processing? So lexical processing is the processing of the meaning of the individual words. But that's not the only meaning each word carries. There's another meaning that each word carries. We call that semantic, not lexical. Lexical is the meaning or the dictionary meaning, but semantic refers to the semantic case role or thematic case role each word plays. Each word or a combination of words like phrase will play a specific semantic case role. And there are five roles a sentence can play in a sentence. Sorry, a word can play in a sentence. And they describe the five different important aspects of a sentence, especially in a narrative. If you think about it, usually there is an action that is described. Then there is a person doing the action. Then is a person receiving the action, and there is a mention of time and location. These are five different semantic case roles a word can take, or thematic case roles a word can take. So if you look at this sentence, you're going to please pause here for a second and identify which of these words act as actor, action, recipient, time, and location. Identify the case roles. Pause here, and when you come back, I'll talk about it. Okay, I hope you did. Try. So, who is the, what is the action here? That's right, chased is the action. Okay, who is the actor here? One more time. Yes, policeman. Right? Who is the recipient here? The burglar, right? Where? What is the location here? Park. What is the time? Well, time here refers to past tense, present tense, future tense. Well, if you look at the verb, you can say that it is past tense. So semantic processing is processing the semantic case roles, which are these five different aspects. Okay, so we just looked at three linguistic levels of processing language: phonetics, syntax, and lexical semantics. Especially, we talked about how lexical and semantic refer to two different content aspects of language. Now, we're going to move on to the two additional levels that psycholinguists study language at. They study language at these three levels plus two additional levels: conceptual and belief level. And we'll talk about conceptual level first, then the belief level. But we're going to take one example and then try to see, well, is phonetic, syntactic, and lexical semantic level sufficient for us to comprehend a sentence? If so, why would we need two additional levels? For that, we need to go to the example. Let's look at this particular sentence. Oh, my bad, it's Mary. Mary and John saw mountains when they were flying to California. Now, what do you think we do at the phonetic level? That's right. You identify the individual letters, their sounds, then you identify the combination of those sounds as a word, right? So you identify each of these words, and when you get to the end of the sentence, that's when you start processing language at the other levels, which would be the syntactic level. What happens at the syntactic level? Well, you identify the subject, verb, object, right? SVO, parts of speech, then the phrasal structure, and I know you can do it, so I'm not going to go over that, right? So far so good. What is next? Lexical semantic. Lexical will help you identify the individual meaning of the individual words. Semantic will help you identify, that's right, the action, the actor, the recipient, location, time, everything else. But here's the thing. Why do you need, when we know the meaning of the individual words, when we also know the semantic case roles each words play, why do we even need the additional two levels? Well, here's a question. Can you describe what this sentence means? It's very obvious. Why am I even asking you, right? Well, it's not so obvious. We actually have to make some inferences. An inference is an information that's not directly stated in a sentence you're reading. You have to make that inference. For instance, who do you think the they refers to here? Mary and John saw mountains when they were flying to California. The question is, who is they referring to? Well, it doesn't say that. I know you just said Mary and John. I heard that. But it didn't say, there is no parenthesis where it says Mary and John. We assume that the they refers to Mary and John, not mountains. How do you know that? Well, you're making an inference there based on your conceptual knowledge of mountains. So, this inference you're drawing about what they refers to, by using your conceptual knowledge, which we'll talk about where this conceptual knowledge comes from in the last chapter, right, is called conceptual level processing. You're not using the definition of mountains. I don't think the definition of mountains incorporates this aspect and say mountains are the structures that don't fly. It doesn't say that, right? But when you have a concept of mountain, it is connected to several other concepts where your concept of mountain has this underlying thing that they can't fly or they're stationary. So conceptual processing will help us understand how we make these small inferences. Again, we do it so quickly that we don't even pay attention to that, but this happens. So that is conceptual processing. Okay, so now coming to the belief level, the fifth level, right? What does this refer to? Well, just think about it. If I tell you that this sentence you just read is a part of a fiction, or let's say it's a part of fiction like Alice in Wonderland. Well, I think from the little I know about Alice in Wonderland from my daughter is that anything can happen there. It's possible that the mountains can fly there, right? So the context in which you're reading a sentence will also influence how you are processing it. If you already know that it's a fictional context, you might be processing it differently. If you think that it is in the context of a stand-up comedy, you may be processing it differently. Or maybe flying means something else in that context, or maybe something else means something else in that context. So belief level is processing the context of the information related to where this is coming from, who is the author, what is the purpose of this one, taking all those into account to make sense of the sentence. That is the that is the belief level. So psycholinguists are not just interested in the structure of language, which is the prescriptive aspect of it, but they're also interested in how people make these inferences by using the conceptual knowledge and by using the context. And these inferences we make based on the conceptual knowledge and based on the context are related to conceptual level processing, and the context is related to the belief level processing. So if you go to, I'm going to go to that particular slide. Okay, if you go here, the psycholinguistics, right? What are the levels here? That's right, conceptual and belief, right? Now, I didn't give information here, but if I had boxes like these, right? Phonetics is helping us identify the word. Syntactic is helping us identify the phrasal structure, SVO, and parts of speech. Okay, this is semantics. Okay, this lexical semantic. Lexical is helping with the lexical meaning and semantic with the semantic case role. What do you think conceptual and belief levels help us process language? What does it help us? Think about it. And I'll give you answer to this in the last slide. Okay. Okay, the fifth outcome for this particular video is this question: does language determine our thought? This, what it means basically is that if you speak English or if you speak Russian or French or other language, then do you think differently? Well, the first person to actually propose this idea was Wolff, so it's called the Wolffian hypothesis. He was a linguist. His logic was that, well, different languages have different number of words for different concepts. For instance, some tribes don't have concepts for all the colors. So his idea was that, well, given that we use concepts to think about, and given that the number of words for a concept or construct are limited in some languages, are not same in all languages, then different languages or the languages you use will determine how you think. Well, that's not necessarily true though, because Raj did was he looked at the words a specific tribe has for colors. They had only two words for colors, and he looked at whether or not they can perceive other colors. Well, what he found was that they do perceive other colors, it's just that they don't have words to actually describe those colors. In other words, language may influence how we talk about um, different things, but it doesn't determine your thought. So the current view is that language may influence our thought, and that influence is coming from the cultural level, but then not language itself. And language will not determine your thought. For example, magenta. Do you know the difference between pink, magenta, and purple, or whatever that is? Well, I didn't know that. I now know it, of course. I'm my wife and my daughter, so I have to learn those things. But do you think we don't perceive these two colors differently, or is it just that we don't have names for those colors? You're right. We know the difference. It's just that we can't find words for those, and we can quickly learn those. Okay, now another point to kind of talk about the cultural effect of on thinking. In other words, the thinking difference comes from cultural aspects, not from the language. Well, the culture itself may have some influence on the words we have. One example I'm going to give is about my grad school experience here in the US. When I first came to the US, and I was the grad student, and I was the only Indian in my group. Everybody else in our group, they were in clinical psych, some were in school psych. So there was like this group, and I used to meet for stats and everything else. So one day, my friend PJ, he came to me and he said, "Free, your mom is so blah 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 that she blah blah blah. Well, I was offended by that. Literally, I felt very bad. I didn't understand that. Just imagine that's the very first semester in the US. I didn't know. I said like, you don't even know my mom. How can you even talk about her like that? I was literally offended. Well, it took me a while to understand the nature of that expression, and which I still don't understand. But uh, it doesn't mean anything. But there is something to it when you say that. I got it. I mean, I was not offended, but I totally understood what it is. Then I said, okay, wait a second. I understand. I get it. But why only mom jokes? Why not dad jokes? So I started creating these dad jokes. Your dad is so blah, blah, blah that he blah, blah, blah. It kind of worked for a couple of days or maybe a week. After that, people forgot. I mean, this just went back to the same mom joke. And no. Why do you think so? Again, whatever these expressions you have about your mom is blah 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 because blah blah blah, which is a linguistic expression, is so you have words and phrases and ideas and expressions in one culture and not other culture, or in one language, not other language. But that's not because of the language. That's because of the culture. I still don't get why mom jokes, but I love my mom, so I can't even think about it. Anyways, so the idea is that language may influence your thought at the cultural level, but not determine your thought. Well, the last outcome for this video is this question: is language unique to humans? Well, think about it. I'm not going to answer this question for you. I want you to think about this question and participate in discussion. Okay? Have fun. Okay, so did you think about what these hypothetical boxes could be? If the product of these levels of processing is listed here, what is a product of, what is a result of processing language at the conceptual level, and what is a product, a result of processing language at the belief level? Yes, inferences. Inferences. They help us make inferences. An inference is any new information that's not directly stated in the text you're reading. They does not directly refer to Mary and John. You have to make an inference. So conceptual and belief levels help us make inferences. Well, thank you very much. I hope you like this video, and I'll see you. Keep listening.